and good about the American society. And certainly our families and children are in a very important part, a backbone of this feeling. So I hope that people do respond and do rally. I know this as I'm a great-great-grandfather as of a week ago.
Wow, congratulations.
And, yeah, it's an exciting time for me. And so the kids in my school, many of them I've watched grow up through all their school years. Many of them I brought here from other countries in legal fashion. And I feel like I'm a grandparent to all of these kids. I want them to grow up with wholesome, real values of what a home is like, what a godly home is like.
Amen.
And this is modeled in the Bible. And so
BibleTipNow.org. The computer's going to take it from me. BibleTipNow.org. That's his website. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan, and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Elizabeth Warren says the quiet part out loud. This is why we continue to cover this story. I know it's New York City, but she says this is going to be a model for the country. They're using New York City as a test model to get socialism throughout the country. This is why this is such a big issue. This is why you got to reject it right now. Number two, you got to remember where all these policies come from. They come from the college campuses. And she used to be a professor. This is the playbook. Bernie Sanders, the same as well. They believe in these policies. They have been saying it for years. The thing is, he's so smooth, and he is the perfect place, the perfect voice to get all the academia, left-wing nonsense through.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday, folks. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, friends, as you can see, woke is not dead. It's resurgent in America with a communist Democrat nominee and mayoral candidate in New York City. The Los Angeles riots was all about wokeism. The No Kings protest, some people thought that was going to be the beginning of the next summer of love. It still might be. We're only in early August now. But that was in most U.S. cities that are bright blue. And it begs the question, are we merely entering the next phase of the manufactured Marxist social and political upheaval generated by the Democrat Party and the radical left in our country, this America that we live in? It is happening before your very eyes. Major leftist political actors such as AOC and Elizabeth Warren are now all in on Democrat socialism and communism. I say communism because only communists have things like government ownership of grocery stores as policy positions, like Zoran, the Democrat nominee that's a Democrat socialist but really a communist in New York City. Government command economic schemes never work and only generate, what do they generate? Starvation, hunger, massive food lines. But Warren, Pocahontas, she says that New York's communism nominee is the model for the rest of America. Don't believe me? Go see what she said. We must continue to fight this virus. That's what it is, until it's totally eradicated from every institution, but especially from our schools, folks, as they are the incubator for this rising tyranny that we face. And author T.S. Dixon is my guest again today to discuss the mind viruses afflicting America. He's an American husband, a father, a businessman living in Southwest Florida. And after witnessing this weaponization of government and the justice system against Trump and the conservative movement, T.S. decided he had to do more to get involved. He released his debut book, The Woke Mind Viruses, Wokeism, Liberalism, Leftism, and Globalism. The mind plagues destroying Western civilization and how to stop them. Earlier this year, we had him on the show to talk about it. and he recently released the audiobook version. TS, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Hey, Rob, great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I didn't think it'd be this soon because I thought seriously that with the Trump administration being reinstated and the quality and level of individuals that he's appointed in his positions, even though not very many have been confirmed, but the ones that have been confirmed and are in position are really strong leaders on this issue. Secretary Hegseth at Defense Department even said they had it eradicated. Now, I talked to an Air Force retired general not long ago that said it's a little bit of a large bureaucracy, the Department of Defense, to say something's totally eradicated in a couple of months. But we've still got some work to do, right, TS? Refresh folks about your book, why you wrote it, and what you see as the parts of the woke mind virus.
Yeah, Rob, I believe and I'm convinced that we're living in one of the greatest moments of Western history and American history. There was 3 great reform movements that helped form and give birth and rise to the modern West. You had the Reformation in the 1500s, you had the American Revolution in the 1700s, and now I believe we're living in the 3rd great reform movement, where it is really against a central banking international cartel that is forcing a lot of these mind viruses down onto Western social civilization so they can control them and control our governments and our economies. And I believe that's what the Tea Party movement, the MAGA movement, and these populist movements we're seeing all around the West are all about. And so in this book, I wanted to expose and dismantle the truth about this network and about these ideologies and these groups that we're up against. It's a coalition of 4 leftist groups, and they all have their own history, their own founding fathers, their own core beliefs, and their own political tactics. And so I dismantle and break that down, distill it down, make it plain for people so that it's not a mystery. And I dispel and dispose with the fake arguments, the false facts, the revisionist histories. And then I go into who we are as a people, where we come from, what our true beliefs are, who our founding fathers are. And I set the record straight. And then I go into this current reform movement we're in, and I give the recipe of the blueprint for total victory. And so that's what's contained in this book. I think it's a really important book for this hour in America and Western history. And for this administration, it's my opinion that if we grade Trump on like a yearbook president, like another school book president, one of 47, he's just passing with flying colors. He's absolutely the greatest Republican president that we've had in the last maybe century or 80 years. But if you judge him based on all of American history, there's 4 great men that have their faces on Mount Rushmore. You have Washington, Jefferson, you have Roosevelt and Lincoln. Why are they on Mount Rushmore and the other presidents are not there? It's because these guys were alive and governed and brought forth these tremendous revolutions in our country that then spread out to the entire Western world and changed Western civilization forever after they were done being president. And so that's why their faces are up there. I think Trump has the opportunity to do the same level of impact as these other men. But he has, in order to do that, he would have to get on board with a lot of the things that I'm prescribing in the book that these 4 mind viruses are using to destroy Western civilization.
Yeah. These ideologies, go into those a little bit more, because honestly, there may be more to it than just the 4 that you've identified. I've been in a discussion about this concept of the woke right here the last 3 or 4 months, and I'm looking at it. I remain unconvinced, but one of those people that's accused of being woke right just tweeted out something in favor of the North Koreans concept just today before we came on the show.
Really?
Yeah. So you think that those ideologies, and I'm assuming you're talking about Marxism and its various critical theories, race, trans, homosexuality, LGBTQ, whatever it is, and those types of things. But then you combine it with communism and Nazism, National Socialism. and then the various forms of socialism that have failed, and of course Maoism together, and you end up with these stovepipes of ideologies like people today will openly say that we have to honor a culture that rapes children routinely, and treats young boys as sex objects routinely and is legal. I mean, that's part of this, I think, sexual focused ideology that comes from the LGBTQ plus, the trans issue, and you can roll in sex trafficking, human trafficking, the drug trade, and all that as some of the evidence out there.
Absolutely.
And everything. And I think I think you're right. The president, TS, he's all over a lot of that stuff, like sex trafficking and human trafficking and saving children, especially saving children that have been brought in illegally and then farmed out, so to speak, to where hundreds of thousands of them are missing. You don't know whether they're dead, they're being used as sex slaves or child labor, like we saw in the marijuana farm that ICE raided out in California not too long ago. I think 11 of those people were underage kids being forced to work out there that were illegals.
They are. It's a massive amount of government-controlled or government-enabled crime. And Trump now, with the Crossfire Hurricane grand jury and investigation, looks like he might begin a process of going after, for the first time in really modern memory, a serious undertaking against government crime, a serious initiative. And that's one of the key parts of the reform movement to solidify the reforms, is to bring justice to the two-tiered justice system and to go after above the line government crime. I had put together like a bingo card, like an evidence board of just 20 of the government crimes that we know of, because the evidence has already been disclosed by the media. And yet no one was ever prosecuted, arrested, indicted for any of these crimes, including the 320,000 missing children that you're referring to, reported on last year by the New York Post. And so that's just one crime of human trafficking of children, but there's many more. And so my recommendation on the past few weeks online has been for Trump. Reagan had his war on drugs. Bush Jr. had his war on terrorism. I think what Trump needs to solidify in his reforms and potentially make him a Mount Rushmore style president is to do a war on government crime and to appoint, a team, a strike force of prosecutors. I would call them Trump's 21 guns of MAGA U.S. attorneys or DOJ attorneys to open investigations into all of these crimes and to publicize it, lionize it to the public so that we can be aware of what's going on and pursue those investigations to the ends of justice. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great proposal. I mean, he is. It looks like the opening salvo for real is happening with this impanelment of a grand jury down in. Is being reported in Florida. We haven't confirmed that completely yet, which would be the right thing to do. I mean, that's where the Mar-a-Lago raid was. That was such a farce.
Indeed.
And it was part of this whole conspiracy. And that's what it really is. It's a very wide conspiracy, starting with President Barack Obama, based on the evidence that Tulsi Gabbard has put out. I'm not just being hyperbolic here or projecting or anything. I mean, those are just facts that are now confirmed by the declassification of the reporting by their own people in some cases, and by whistleblowers in the intel community. That the facts are that Barack Obama and Joe Biden and the highest levels of all the intelligence community were part of this conspiracy to make it look like Donald Trump was an asset of Russia and that Russia favored his election, when quite the opposite is the reality, is that Russia really looked more favorably on having a Hillary Clinton in the presidency because they could manipulate her through what they had on her based on the documents that have been released. So
Absolutely.
Declaring war on government crime, I think is very important. And there's different stovepipes and facets to the government crime. Just in the Department of Defense, the way the COVID order was done unlawfully, all of that needs to be peeled back, investigated from a legal perspective and a criminal perspective, so the right accountability takes place, even in the Department of Defense, which I think most people still trust them to be ethical and honorable. I know I do, but quite honestly, I'm disappointed in my fellow commanders for doing things like falling back on the legal guys told me it was legal, so I executed this order in good faith when they trampled on the religious freedom rights of the service members by almost 100% denials of their religious accommodation requests that Congress had put in place to protect people from things like a COVID vaccine that was experimental. We got to take a break, commercial break, TS. When we come back, I want to dive into this rise of communism in the United States of America. And it's real, folks. It's real. What can we do about it? Right here with TS Dixon.
Socialism is this kind, gentle thing where the leadership doesn't take more than they need for themselves, which is their complaint about capitalism.
Nobody who's advocating for these ideas or these policies actually wants to participate in any of these systems.
That's
once
the
the
thing.
problems actually come to their door. I mean, you need look no further than all the people who scream defund the police, and they're the first people to dial 911 when they feel like they're in danger and go, somebody come and help me, I need a police officer, or the people who want to socialize medicine. They don't want to go, they want to go to private hospitals. They want to have the best medical care that they can possibly get. They hate these policies, but they want them for everybody else.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Yeah, communist leaders, the official party people, they never stand in the food lines that they create. And that's this guy, Zoran Mondami, that's the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City, largest city in America. Senator Warren says New York City is the model for America, and Mamdani is the representative of that model. And he wants the government to own the grocery stores. He wants to tax white people more so that wealth can be redistributed to everybody else and make it less expensive to live in New York City. My guest today is T.S. Dixon, author of The Woke Mind Virus, which is a book defining this woke mind viruses, these different stovepipes of this thing. And T.S. Communism, Marxism is really the root of all these woke mind viruses. In my opinion, it's tyranny, authoritarianism, and the first thing that communism wants to do is take over the means of production and take over all businesses so that the government runs them. And it ultimately fails dramatically. But now we have this guy, Zoran, he is more than likely, from a statistical perspective, going to be the mayor of New York City.
Yeah.
And it's
Most
unbelievable.
likely.
And that's why I titled the show, and I agree with you. I think I used a little different words than you. You know, woke hasn't gone away. It's rising again. This is the evidence of it.
Yeah, you know, there's a deliberate attack on our economic structures. This country is sort of like a giant whale floating through the ocean, and sharks are just coming in and taking huge bites out of us. Or you could think of us like a massive milking cow. We're the wealthiest, most prosperous nation in the history of humanity, mankind. And so the powers that be think they can just milk us to death and take us for all we're worth. And our leaders and elected officials have done nothing but help facilitate this over the last 100 years. And so it's getting to a breaking point now where the theft has been so rampant that it's really affecting younger generations that are coming up, and they're coming up through these school systems that have been commandeered and captured by leftists, by hard left Marxists, promoting the woke ideology to young people. And then they come into a job market and an economy where it's harder than it's ever been. I think this might be one of the first times where it's people expect that they will not have a greater standard of living than their parents. And so how is this possible if we're the richest country in the history of the world and our economy's booming, our stock market's on fire? How is it that this whole generation is just getting pummeled and wiped out and they're turning to radicalism? Well, the answer is that we're being stolen from. Our entire economic system is based on theft. And it starts with our central banking system that created a debt-based money system where our government cannot issue currency. It has to issue bonds and borrow the money and pay interest on that debt. And that gives us a national debt and an income tax to pay that debt. And the theft goes on and on from there, from foreign workers to globalist multinational organizations that we're all funding through these transnational treaties, to money laundering through the federal government, like we saw with USAID and other organizations, Act Blue, all the way down to the many wars that were set up so that the American taxpayer could be pilfered and milked more through various means. I mean, look at the Ukraine war, and the money laundering that's happened there is just one case study. And so it goes on and on. And if we don't start to take the theft, the government crime, and the theft seriously, then more and more young people are going to turn to people like Zoran Mamdani and these communist young upstarts, especially as the wealthy and the conservatives are fleeing blue states and blue cities. So they're just going to become darker and darker blue with the voting base. And we're going to see more and more of these radical type ideologies come into the positions of power.
Yeah, I think that's the best explanation that I've heard someone give about why young people are turning to these guys. I mean, there's even some reporting, and I'm not quite convinced that I've seen enough data yet, that some of the younger voters that went for Donald Trump are going for Mamdani. And it's because they voted for Donald Trump because they believe he could get the economy turned around so that they could eventually join people like me and you and achieve the American dream, you know, be able to own a house and own assets and things instead of just being a renter, that kind of lifestyle. And this generation has really been blocked out of that because of these policies that you were just talking about. So they're going for the communist, which they expect. And let me see if I understand this correctly. They expect the communist government to steal from you and me and give it to them because we deserve to have it stolen from us.
Because in communism, the bourgeoisie, the upper class, those with money and means and businesses, you know, they're the oppressor. That's the storyline. That's the pitch. And then the proletariat, the underdogs, they are the oppressed. They are the victims. And so this is how you create class warfare and class struggle. And the solution for this is revolution and bringing in the Marxist government. You know, that is the formula from Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx. And remember, these people, their origin of their belief system goes back to Darwin and Friedrich Nietzsche and then Marx. These are the three intellectual fathers of leftism. And Darwin taught them there was no God. We all crawled out of the ooze, survival of the fittest. Nietzsche took that and said, well, if there's no God and survival of the fittest, then life is meaningless. There's no purpose to life. There's no good and evil, no afterlife, no right and wrong. So all there is left is the will to power, beauty, pleasure like sex, and prolonging one's lifespan. That's all there is. And Karl Marx says, well, if that's true and Darwin's true, then here's 10 steps to achieving will to power. It's called the Communist Manifesto. That's what they really believe in.
Yeah, exactly right. There's another aspect to this guy in New York, though, that I want to talk about. I'm sure you've heard of the red-green axis. See, he's an Islamist from an Islamist family. He is not really had a real job in the country. He's only been a citizen for a very short period of time as an immigrant. And that culture of Islamism is the one I was talking about from the pedophilia perspective of being normal in the culture. So, even though he's going to verbalize, oh, no, I don't believe in that, he's advocated policies for like eliminating the police or defunding the police, eliminating prisons, so that you can't put people like pedophiles away. And I think Americans look at that, and the ones not voting for him go, well, that's the attempt to destroy the nuclear family, which is a common strategy of Marxism and communism. That piece of it makes me scratch my head when I see a senator, U.S. senator, or a congresswoman like AOC support this guy when I'm just talking about facts. I'm not talking about anything I'm projecting on this man. He has said those things. I want to defund the police. I want to eliminate prisons. What good are they? I think is a quote. What good are prisons? What value do they bring at the beginning of a discussion about eliminating them? And you combine that with the wanting to take over the means of production, businesses like grocery stores and those kind of things. And it certainly appears like what you're talking about, that the essence is there is no God. So then that means there's no right and wrong, and everything's about pursuing your own personal pleasure. Am I wrong on that?
And power. Absolutely. Yeah. In life, the purpose to their life to achieve will to power becomes revolution. Revolution becomes the object of their destiny. It is the only way that they fulfill will to power, is to bring the revolution. And so in their mind, they're wholly focused. Nothing else matters. And when they say things like, oh, no prisons, defund the police, they don't actually believe that. They are trying to trick their followers and voting base into falling for something like that. Anybody that actually experienced that understands how bad it is for the community. You just get rampant crime. But there's really 4 strategies of communism to bring in the revolution. First, you have the indoctrination. Then you go to destabilization. And for destabilization, you need things like massive crime. You need things like corrupt police or no police. You need people to be poor and hungry. You need the systems to be breaking down so that you can bring in the third stage, which is crisis. And through the crisis, then they bring the revolution either through an election or through some sort of event. And then finally, you have normalization, where people now must adjust to the new one-party communist regime state that they're going to be living under for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and they're not going to call it communism. They're not going to call it Islamism. It's going to be something else. I mean, he calls himself a Democrat socialist because that's a softer way to put the language, but it doesn't matter. It's still, especially the Marxism we're seeing in America practiced by the left for the most part, it's like a Maoism cast of Marxism, where you hit the family, the Cultural Revolution, you hit the educational institutions at higher education and the professors, and we've even seen things like struggle sessions, like they had in the Cultural Revolution, where children of parents that might have been professors in the college were publicly up on stage, hitting them, beating them, sometimes to death. And humiliating them in order to remove their ability to be able to influence the education of young people by ruining their reputations and saying that they're the wrong type of people. It's kind of like you hear some say, well, there's an attack in this vein on white males in the United States, and the problem with masculinity and those kind of things. Do you see that as a key part of their effort here?
Yeah, Marx was a secular theologian, and he realized the most powerful way to make his theory popular was to turn it into a political religion, because religious beliefs go deeper than any really other core beliefs. And a lot of times they defy logic. They're based on mainly faith and commitment to the ideas themselves. And so that's why leftists ignore facts altogether and ignore, the forest right in front of them and only believe in their Marxist woke beliefs. But yes, the core, there's really two parts to the strategy, the sales pitch. The first part is you have to divide society into warring classes. You got to take this holistic society or whole family or whole state, and you got to divide them and then turn them against each other. This is called class warfare. And so in Russia, what they did, and in China, what they did, is they took the poor and the young and they turned them against those with means, those who own businesses, those that were wealthy or upper class. And so that's the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. Now, that didn't work in England or America or Western countries. It failed. And so in the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 1930s, Horkheimer and Marcuse and these other communists got together to try and figure out why it wasn't working in Western countries. And what they realized was the attack vectors to go after in the West were different than they were in Russia and China, which were these ethno-states and had really terrible oligarchical capitalism where it was very corrupt with the government. So you had these mega rich and these despotives, awful poverty. And so it works in that situation. But we had Teddy Roosevelt and the progressive movement of the 1800s, not the Democrat progressive, the actual good one. And we had fair labor, and we had things like prosperity for workers. So it didn't work here. So they decided they need to go after the animosity that existed between racial lines. So it turns blacks against whites as the new proletariat versus the new bourgeoisie, turn women against men, right? So that's where you get the attack on men. That's where you get the attack on the white majority. And then they had to go further with radicalism to that now look for other victim groups to turn against and create an oppressor group. So that's why you now have gay, lesbian, transgenders that are being oppressed according to them by gender normative male, regular male, female, traditional marriage types and traditional family types. And so that's how you get the new class warfare through wokeism and through liberalism, which is just Marxism, new versions of Marxism tailor-made for American populations and the modern young people.
Yep, and they focus it at the early schoolhouse to get at the children the most. And we're going to talk about the school system and Randy Weingarten, and who is, I think, probably the most visible Marxist in the American education society for the most part, because she's got a new partnership she wants to do, and it kind of crosses over from left to right, but on the authoritarian side and the guise of globalism. We'll be right back with T.S. Dixon.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
but it's the idea laundering you've described that I think is most troubling. And we've seen states put more power in the hands of school boards and in the hands of parents to decide curriculum, to be discussing curriculum. I guess what worries me when I see this story is that you could have a world in which this very powerful teachers union of 1.8 million members does an end run around some of the good policy choices elected leaders have made and instead instill the curriculum and the pedagogy of the World Economic Forum. Is that something that could happen? Could this partnership get in the way of like the good reforms we've seen in places like Florida?
Exactly. That's what they're trying to do. But that's why I was about to point out that this is why it's so important to implement Trump's agenda to abolish the Department of Education once and for all, or at least try to give it death by 1,000 cuts. Thankfully, the Supreme Court greenlit his idea to have mass firings, over 1,000 people laid off at the Department of Education. Hopefully that's just a start. I'm looking towards those rescissions packages. That only requires a simple majority to claw back funding from the behemoth that we have, which is the Department of Education. It should have never existed in the first place. It was a political payoff by Jimmy Carter in 1979 to placate the teachers union. He wanted the NEA endorsement. So hopefully we can return education to the states, and more importantly, return education not just to states, but to families. States like Florida, where you're at, and Matt, is they're leading the way on school choice. This is the way we beat the unions. We defund them with parents voting with their feet, and also tell teachers to stop paying those Democrat money laundering operations. It's true, though. I mean, Randy Weingarten's union funnels 99% of their campaign contributions every single cycle to the Democrat campaign coffers. It's ridiculous. It ought to be illegal. But the next best thing that we can do is to defund them through school choice and tell teachers, if you're not aligned with this garbage, if you don't want to fund this nonsense anymore, leave your union. You can get private liability insurance if that's what you're worried about. You don't have to fund the politics. And so you can leave, too. You can help defeat the monstrosity that is Randy Weingarten's teachers union.
Liberation Day awaits you, America's teachers. And Corey DeAngelis just told you how to do it.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And today we're talking about wokeism isn't dead yet. It's actually on the rise again. And my guest today is author T.S. Dixon, author of the book, The Woke Mind Virus, which lays out a roadmap of how to identify this stuff. And roadmap to solutions. And we're seeing some of those solutions play out. And that was Corey DeAngelis with Matt Gaetz on OAN TS talking about Randy Weingarten, the American Federation of Teachers Union. And right after she said, we're going to partner with the WEF, the World Economic Forum, because the president's destroying the Department of Education at the federal level. And I find that very interesting because most Americans that I talk to, when they hear World Economic Forum, they hear tyranny, they hear pandemic overreach, they hear death from things like vaccines, they hear autism being created by vaccines, even though, there's debate on both sides of those issues, but that's what they hear. And I don't think parents, TS, are going to stand up to having the WEF infuse their curriculum into our schools in any way whatsoever. Your thoughts?
Yeah, one of the great slogans of the World Economic Forum was you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So if that tells you what their core values are, I mean, that speaks for itself. That's Marxism, the abolishment of private property, except somebody's going to own that property. All of their partner members, which are multinational corporate owners, oligarchs, and heads of state. And so those are the people who are going to own everything, and you have the pleasure and the good fortune of renting everything you use from them, but remain abjectly poor yourself. So that's their plan. And I want to talk about the origins of how we got here with the school system. Our school system was greatly engineered by a guy called John Dewey. They even named the old library Dewey Decimal System after him because he was so influential on the school system. And he was a psychologist, and also a philosopher. And he developed many theories about education. And he was one of the forefathers of the liberal ideology. And they believed in something he taught called social consciousness. And social consciousness is basically the idea that you can improve society by instilling hard left liberal values on school children because they can't really discern right from wrong. And so but these authority figures instill these values into the kids, and then they grow up and they take over society. And now you displace what you think are, your enemy's values with your values through the means of the school system. That's called social consciousness. A better word for it would be liberal indoctrination. And you can see that this is still going on steroids today, where they are teaching 5-year-olds about gender identity theories and queer theory, right? Confusing kids about their gender and their sexuality as young as 5 years old. Again, this is them pushing their values, their liberal, warped Marxist values onto our kids through the school system. The school system has produced unbelievable statistics of statutory rape with teachers and staff sleeping with young underage students. You have drag queen story hours and story times and drag events. You have the gay and trans agenda. You have the critical race theory that's being forced on kids, revisionist history. And guess what they don't teach in any of Randy Weingarten's school union schools? They don't teach things like, finance, banking, mortgages, credit cards, anything to do with that. Why? Because the other thing that the liberal overlords wanted was for these school systems to produce not only liberals, that's why they only teach Darwinism. And you get into college, they'll really only they love, especially in certain fields like psychology and whatnot, they love Friedrich Nietzsche and Freud, but they don't teach anything that's going to help you own a business or do good with finance, because they want workers. That's what they want. They want workers, and they want good liberal voting workers. That's what public school is for.
Yeah, it's amazing that pre-COVID, most jobs were still being created by small businesses. I think the numbers were over 80% at that time. But now that's dropped dramatically, because you're right. They want people that will work for either government or big companies, and they don't want them to own anything. Now, the president has come in really strong with policies in this area. And I think the last clip we'll see is Randy Weingarten losing it over the Department of Education issue. But the reason why he's doing that is to try to get at this wokeism indoctrination in the schools, isn't it? I mean, tell us, based on your roadmap that you have in the book, how the administration is doing so far in this regard.
I think they're doing really well. Like I said, if they're just going for a great yearbook, school book type president, one of 47, he has already exceeded the expectations. I think he's done better than Reagan, better than Nixon, better than most right-wing presidents that we've had in modern history. However, this is drastic times call for drastic measures, and we don't live in an ordinary time. We live in like a mid-1800s time where the country is in real trouble, our kids are in real trouble, our world is in real trouble, and we need a great reformer. We need a great Andrew Jackson, a great Lincoln. The presidents that did such big things, they're on the money, right? They're on the dollar bill, the various bills that we use for money, or they're on Mount Rushmore. We need that level. And for Trump to do that, he's already taken a ton of punishment, taken a ton of risk to do what he's done so far. But he would have to go much, much farther, like I said, to root this out. He's doing a good job of starting to dismantle some of the federal systems like USAID, the Department of Education. But a lot of the things he said, like that first clip you played, as soon as he's out of office and if the Democrats get back in, it's just some executive orders and maybe 1 or 2 bills in Congress signed by their president, and they're back in business. So what we need is what I call for in the book, in the last 2 chapters of the book, in this freedom anti-corruption agenda, is called massive institutional reform. There's 4 stages to it. And if he does all 4 stages and roots out the reforms in the system, goes after government crime, cuts off all the theft, and then theft out of 5, 6 categories, he's doing great in 2, foreign workers and globalism. He's doing great there. Right. But we need him to do something with central banking which is the source of the debt and the income tax. We need to do some more on the war front with the war theft and other areas. So like more of the money laundering. They stopped the USAID guys from publicizing all of the waste and the fraud and the money laundering happening. I love the military, but at the Pentagon, I mean, how can you lose $4.3 trillion on the books? I mean, that's a lot of money out of our economy. It's just gone. Overall, federal government, $21 trillion missing. Just gone.
Yeah.
You know, we can't locate this money. That's crime. That's theft. That's coming out of somebody's pocket, and they're going to go and follow Mamdani and these other woke heroes that the left is rising up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they use I'm glad you mentioned USAID before we go to the break. I'll just say this. I was very disappointed that Doge only found $160 billion or $160 billion, a little bit over that, I think, of fraud, waste, and abuse in the Department of Defense. At the time they were doing it, it was just shy of $1 trillion. Now the budget's over $1 trillion. That's impossible. I spent 32 and a half years of my life in that organization. It's impossible for there not to be more, much more of that, especially when they can't pass an audit. And you mentioned the over $4 trillion that's just vanished and lost. We got to do a lot more of that. When we got to go to this break, TS. When we come back for our last segment, like I said, you're going to see Weingarten rant a little bit at a No Kings protest. We'll be right back with T.S. Dixon.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
Philly, you are the community to this president's chaos. And together, we build a future of opportunity and justice for all. Hope over fear, aspiration over anger, the promise of America for each and every American. That is what we are fighting for today.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. That's president of the American Federation of Teachers right there, Randy Weingarten, the most visible and recognizable Marxist in American society. And she's in charge of the basic indoctrination of Marxism into your kids in the public school system. And she was at a No Kings rally. And my guest today is T.S. Dixon. We're talking about the audio release of his book, The Woke Mind Virus. And the roadmap that he's got in there of how to defeat this thing, because really, while there's been some good inroads made, it's still out there, and actually it's on the rise again, in my opinion, in our society. And we've got to get after it to fix this. And T.S., the No Kings protests really they make me chuckle, but they also make me think very hard. And remember and remind the young people that saw them that this is what tyrants do. They try to take our language and our concept and flip it on its head so that they're basically wearing what kids today might say a skin suit of the Declaration of Independence, a skin suit of the Constitution of the United States and the basic American values that we don't have any kings, except in my case, I'm a Christian, King Jesus, which no kings, but King Jesus was a motto of American Revolutionary War military units. So they took this concept and try to flip it when they're trying to push tyrant tyranny as a concept and a lifestyle onto these kids in our school system. There couldn't be a better messenger than Randy Weingarten for that. What are some of the ways that we can defeat this concept and these ideologies when we see them doing things like this? Because they have a lot. You mentioned the money. They just have so much money behind them. It's almost like playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah, because, Rob, they're taking our money. They steal our money to fund globalism and liberalism and their political campaigns and careers. They take our money. That's how the government theft comes in. You know, when they ended a lot of the USAID programs, a bunch of these globalists got on TV and started crying and accusing Elon Musk of killing hundreds of thousands of kids. Why? Because they were cutting off the funding to their globalist initiatives that are devastating to U.S. taxpayers and U.S. families. And so it's no wonder to me that Randy Weingarten is trying to team up with the globalist World Economic Forum. You know, in the book, I detail the history of globalism, where that comes from, and what the true ideology of globalism is, which is a very dark ideology. Liberalism is dark. It's basically Marxism retailored, like you said, wrapped in an American flag and the Constitution for the American people, even though it wants to burn the Constitution down and incinerate the American flag. These people, their beliefs are disgusting, vile, repulsive. They are un-American, and if they actually promoted the ideas they actually believe, they would be wholeheartedly rejected by the people and the voters. And so, like you said, they have to manipulate, they have to lie, they have to connive, they have to twist history and facts, change the definitions to words in order to constantly try to social engineer the public and run propaganda in order to get their policies through so they can move us farther and farther left towards revolution while stealing as much of our money as they possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you mentioned before the break the power and how to address it as part of your plan and your roadmap. And one of the things you mentioned that hasn't been touched at yet is banking. Now, I just saw an interview with the president. I think it was from last night. I saw it today, where he's talking about going after banks that debanked people under this woke ideology thing. I mean, that's a good step in the right direction, but it's got to go much deeper than that, right?
Yeah, you know, a real reform, a real lasting reform has to come with criminal justice at the tail end of it in step 4. You have to have you have to retake the country, you have to reform the country. That's policies and laws that are changed. But then you have to have criminal justice. You have to punish the corrupt. And so that's step 4. And that's both in crime and theft, which is financial crime. You know, I don't know if it's okay. Can I share a visual aid here of what I was talking about earlier?
Sure.
So this is a scorecard that I created that is just 20 of the government crimes that we know through disclosures by the media, from the 320,000 missing kids you talked about, 21 trillion missing dollars, the Act Blue, Twitter files, open border human trafficking. But I put a Twitter blue check mark there on one of them because they've opened an investigation. Now they're impaneling a grand jury, we believe, on Crossfire Hurricane, which is a crime. It's a seditious conspiracy, which there are no statute of limitations for. And so potentially they're going after that. You know, Trump, as the president of the United States, is the top law enforcement agent in the country. He's also in charge of all the prosecutors, the Department of Justice. Therefore, he's like the top prosecutor in the country. And so when crimes happen at the top level of transnational organizations and in the U.S. federal government, the only remedy, there's things like inspector generals that we have, but they're easily corrupted and influenced and ideologued. And so really the only true remedy we have is the Department of Justice and the White House. And if they're not willing to open investigations and punish crime at that level, we have injustice. We have tyranny, and that's what we've had. And so you have all of these things that need to be investigated so we can find out what really went on, and if there was crimes, punish them, which it looks like there were crimes, and this work has to be done. And so I say he chooses, 21 guns, 21 prosecutors to go after, investigate, arrest, indict, and prosecute these guys. And I think they need to be MAGA outsiders, not these swamp creature lawyers. And then here's the theft. I'm trying to make it simple for people, and I give Trump a current score. He's only 6 months, 7 months in. So red is no progress. Green means he's already reformed it, and yellow means he's talking about it in speeches, okay? Which is good. That's how you start. But look, central banking, globalism, money laundering, foreign workers, war, cartels, and monopolies. Which on war and cartels and monopolies, he hasn't said anything about the theft that's going on in those. And in America, it's illegal to have a monopoly or form a cartel. That is illegal according to the Sherman antitrust laws. This is part of how we became so wealthy. We had a big middle class, was because we stopped these corrupt criminals from forming and abusing capitalism by forming cartels and monopolies. And they were illegal. And the federal government's job, part of it, is to police that and punish that and keep it from happening. If they do form, they're supposed to break them up. And that's called trust busting. But the powers that be and the globalists and the central bankers have weakened our laws in the Supreme Court and in the federal courts over the last 80 years, so that now we have more cartels and monopolies stealing from Americans than we've ever had in history. I mean, we're the mecca of cartels and monopolies. So these are the kinds of things he's got to do, roll up his sleeves like Teddy Roosevelt, if he's going to really save America and put his face on something like Mount Rushmore. But the central banking thing, he's starting to go head to head. People are starting to realize he has no power over the central bank. He can't tell them what interest rate to do. He has no control over that because of the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, where they created the debt-based money supply, put America in debt, and started the income tax on workers. I mean, we tax our workers. That is insane theft. These people need this money for food, for education, for their kids, for their houses, for cars to get to work.
That's right.
And we're taking 30, 40% of their money from the workers when the billionaires and the monopoly men pay less than 10% tax often through loopholes. That's crime. That's a criminal act. But I can go on and on.
Yeah, it is a criminal act, at TS. One of the things I would add to your grid there is the law breaking in the Department of Defense. And just as a reminder, just like the president is the chief prosecutor in the civilian law, he is the commander in chief of the armed forces, which makes him the chief wielder of court martial authority as the commander in chief under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So he has the power to hold people accountable and have people investigated for these crimes. Just wanted to bring that in because that's a road into the crimes on the war thing. And I'm glad you explained the cartel thing because I was giving him a little bit of credit on the drug cartel policy because of the way he's handling the immigration policy and the southern border security and those kind of things. But you were talking about a totally different species, which is what kept people poor before, monopolies and cartels formed by corporations that had too much power. Now, he's got a good assistant attorney general that looks at that issue. And it takes time, and he doesn't have a lot of time. One more question before we get to the show for you is, as part of your roadmap, what's Congress's role? Because I keep saying they've got to codify the president's policies in law in order to make them as permanent as possible.
That's a great question. So I advocate in the book, in the final chapter of the book, for an omnibus style reform bill where we take all of our reforms that we want and we do to them what they do to us. We load it all into one super bill, but a short bill, because like the Constitution, we don't need a lot of language to outlaw things and to restrict government's power. And so I call it the Anti-Corruption Act. And I lay out 33 provisions that would reform central banking, commercial banking, bribery and blackmail of public officials, the CIA being able to interact with media or social media companies and promote propaganda or control speech, everywhere to the Department of Education, which I would get rid of, school choice, break the power of the unions, on and on and on. There's 33 areas, everything from censorship to medical data privacy to restricting and eliminating surveillance, to repealing the Patriot Act, to repealing the National Security Act, to amending the Federal Reserve Act, all through one bill. In that,
fantastic.
Since they get their giant 1.2 trillion spending packages, we want our giant, massive institutional reform anti-corruption bill. That's all they really need to do is give him that one bill, and for him to sign it with one swipe of the pen, the law part of the work would be done. But then the criminal justice part and the rooting out theft and the breaking up of these big trusts, these monopoly and cartels that have formed, and rooting out corruption. Again, I think the big reason the drug cartels have been able to operate is because of their relationship with the CIA, which much of that was uncovered in the 80s and 90s and Iran-Contra and afterwards with Mena, Arkansas, and Columbus, Ohio, and whatnot, and the Air America. And we need to fully look into that. That needs a full-scale investigation. That's on that bingo card in the lower corner.
That's a big time government theft area. That's also interwoven into the war area in the Department of Defense. It's huge. Well, TS, thank you very much for joining me today. Tell folks real quick how they can get to you. Got about 20 seconds left to find the book. You guys, you got to go buy this book. And I hope you're communicating to the leadership of the Congress. So that
maybe you can put me in touch with a few more. I've been just going on media, but people can find the book on Amazon, and the audio is on audible.com.
All right, thank you. T.S. Dixon, author of The Woke Mind Viruses. We have highly intelligent people that have the ideas. We just got to get them in the right place, get them implemented, and find people that are in the power, that have the courage like Donald Trump has, all of that down the line. Tomorrow is Whistleblower Wednesday. And I just lost my guest for that before we came on the show, so I don't have a name for you, but I'm sure it'll be a great show. I'll see you then.